Hi, welcome to all. Great to have both Rajat and Pradeep in this session. Rajat, just a quick introduction. Rajat is the CEO of Ackuity, and Pradeep is the VP in Finesse, Dubai. Both of them have worked extensively on the artificial intelligence and GenAI space. And so, this session, we are looking forward to hear a lot on your experience on AI and GenAI space or a domain specifically. Rajat, the question is that now every conversation we are having, whether it is a digital transformation or is it a productivity or a customer experience, is all associated with Gen AI or an AI component to that. You are based in US. You are seeing a lot of adoption over there. So can you just help us understand what are the type of adoptions, how it is evolving?
Yes, good to talk to you today, Sunil, and welcome listeners to this webcast. So, yeah, coming back to the question, what are the typical usage of Gen AI? I believe Gen AI is going to reshape how we think about computing. We may not be directly using any more screens and menus. We'll talk to computer as we talk to humans, and it'll also reshape how we think about our work. Because if you think about work in a business environment, a lot of it is about language. We read reports, we analyze charts, we summarize things, we exchange written information, whether over emails or medium like this, Teams. We present ideas, we present through PPTs, various reports. So a lot of those things can be done by Gen AI. It can liberate us from a lot of this time consuming work, low value work, so that we can focus on a lot more on what's more innovative, what's more improvements, strategy, insights, all those things. So that's the one area where a lot of organizations are focusing on how to increase the efficiency and productivity and take out the low value, time consuming work. But other than that, there is also Gen AI can come in to increase business value. What I mean by that is while we think that Gen AI is all about language, but it's really not so. It can do reasoning, it can do analytics, it can do even maths. You can add things like text to SQL, function calling, and point it to data, and it can do a lot of data analysis. So when you combine the two, it can change a lot of functions in an organization, be it in marketing, about targeting customers, pricing strategy, be it in production, about optimizing production, doing predictive maintenance, or take about SOC, like today we are mostly going to talk to CISOs in this webinar. You can do a lot of things in SOC or in audit or in compliance. A lot of things that today we may be doing through cumbersome ways can be done by Gen AI. In fact, a recent study by Goldman shows that the impact of Gen AI on businesses could be almost to the tune of 7% to global economy. That's almost 7 trillion can be added during this decade with Gen AI coming in.
Is that because of the new use cases or is it because of the improved productivity? Where is that actually adding up?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's a mix of both, right? So productivity, of course, but also Gen AI can unleash a lot of new creativity things. Just imagine if you want to do a lot of scenario planning for your business, you may not be able to look at all the scenarios, but you use a Gen AI to read reports, look at industry, look at economic trends, look at multiple things, and it can do quickly a lot more scenario generation than what we would have done. So it's both. It increases productivity, but it also expands the horizon of the business.
So, Rajat, you have used GenAI specifically over there as a layman way. Can you? So we were hearing about machine learning, or before that we were hearing about the big data, then the machine learning, AI, now Gen AI. Now there is something called the customer AI specific to coming on that. So can you just help us understand how does this all components differ?
Okay. So I think all of them finally are about better automation to a large extent, right? So you were doing automation earlier, but they were all static. We automate a process by writing fixed rules, writing fixed commands. With AI or machine learning, now you can have the automation where it learns from the past data. You don't need to write fixed rules and commands. And it also evolves as it sees more data. So just to take an example, suppose your computer fails and you send a email, submit a ticket, you get an automated response saying, yeah, ticket is acknowledged and some expected time frame for resolution. That's an automation. But suppose you have an agent running on your system and that it predicts based on the data that your computer is going to fail, and then it initiates some action. That's an AI. right? Now, what Gen AI is doing is it's taking AI to the next level. Instead of looking at some failure and taking action, which is again little bit fixed basis. Now, suppose you make it completely free flow. A complex event has happened, a failure has happened, and you now interact with the person in a natural way. You can talk to the person, you can have the conversation, you can adopt the response based on the conversation, and you can reason something out and then solve the problem. So that's the future of AI in terms of Gen AI.
So there is a lot of trust in the system has to be there when you are allowing the system to generate itself or predict something out. I think from a security perspective, I'll come to that a bit later. But now another pressing question. Always we hear about a use case and the interface which is coming out. How does this ecosystem work? What is there in the front? What is in the middle? What is in the end? How does the entire A system look like?
So actually, it's let's talk about the Gen AI, which is going to more coming up in the industry and in the businesses. So at the core of it, you would have a LLM, large language model. The simplest deployment is you just take a public large language model and point your users to that. But that's of low value and it's also least secure. So more and more, if you want to optimize your business process or you want to use your own sensitive data, organizations are going to deploy private LLMs and use the existing data or their own data for these private LLMs. And the interesting thing is a lot of the smaller sized LLMs today have good enough capabilities and their cost is manageable that you can now do on own deployments, private deployments, on-premise deployments of these. And then you point them to your data. Instead of the current like chat GPT, which has learned the internet data, you can have your LLMs grounded with your own data so that it provides more accurate information. And the way to ground it is there are three ways actually today. You can train these on your own data, but that's time consuming and costly. So on an average, it could cost you 2 to 4 million just to train a small LLM on your data. The other way people do is you fine tune an existing LLM. You just give some sample questions and answers from your domain. So it gets fine tuned, but it doesn't understand all of your data. The most viable solution or the most popular right now is about RAG pipelines. You take your LLM, you create a RAG pipeline so that it connects to your internal system. And every time a question is asked by an user, the LLM on its own knows what to fetch from the backend system, takes that data, and uses that data to answer the user back. So those are the typical deployments right now that are happening.
Got it. So now Pradeep, Finis does a lot of work on this space. Okay, because you are one of the leading service providers in the region, and I understand that you are doing a lot of visionary ideas on the AI space. So, what are you seeing in the market from a customer perspective of their adoption to AI or a Gen AI and the entire journey?
First of all, thank you, Sunil, for for this hosting this important webcast. I'm sure, it will be valuable information to many CISOs who are going to look at this space as an emerging threat vector. Yeah, Middle East, there is a lot of enthusiasm in terms of Gen AI adoption, but it's not structured well approach. So everybody is trying to make the best use of it, mainly on automation areas. So when a corporate open up Gen AI for its employees or for other domains where they can leverage on their business, most of them are not aware about the upcoming threat vectors emerging in this space globally as well as locally. So that's a place where even if there is no regulatory enforcement happening soon in this area, Gen AI brokerage will become a necessity for many of the corporates to ensure that security controls, AI related security controls are in place where their data is not fetched without sufficient RBAC approvals or PII sensitivity or other way of data leakage, which is not known and visible to industry so far, especially in Middle East.
So, Pradeep, is it that the security, because when Rajat explained the how the entire system works out, a lot of questions are related to security and privacy came into my mind. But before that, from a customer perspective, is it that the security or the privacy concern is slowing their adoption, or is it they are still trying to understand which is the right deployment methods to do it? So, have they crossed that path first?
Before answering this question, let me tell you something else which we observed. AI is lowering the threshold for most of the threat actors. So they can use easy technique like phishing using AI algorithms or better SQL injection attacks, which they could have taken months to develop. It's easy available for them through this Gen AI tools. So yes, to answer you, yes, this sort of adoption is going to be challenging for corporates or the people whoever is going to use it. But no, we need to industry need to come up with such sort of maturity where proper adoption from a Gen AI brokerage or control system becomes will be helpful for them.
Agreed, Pradeep. So it is a chicken egg story. Now the advisories are picking up AI faster. They are leveraging AI for their improving their attack scenarios.
Yeah.
Due to which the defenders are now compelled to use it to keep up with that phase.
True.
Now, Rajat, coming back to earlier when you described the entire thing, one major question coming to my mind is that in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there is a very strong regulations. Already a guidelines has been given on AI adoption. So the ethical use of AI, which is a mandate requirement and it's a well-written document. So if you look at accountability, privacy, non-biased thing, lot of 7 or 8 different specific sessions are there on that. So don't you think that there is a lot of risk associated with a large scale? Because earlier you mentioned is like an automation, very specific use cases, very few data sources connecting back. But when this adoption goes slightly bigger, and is going to be extremely complex. What are the risks we anticipate from coming from this?
Yeah, means Gen AI is going to be rewarding, but like they say, right, every reward has a risk with it. So if you look at all the talk around Gen AI risks, and there are a lot of talks around that, these risks are not really categorized right now. Means there are so many different ways of naming the risk. So what I was trying to do was trying to think of a category that is easy to remember. Means if you think of security for ages, we say CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, right? So for my own easy recall, I created a mnemonic, a kind of acronym to remember the risks in Gen AI. And I called it as cubes, like the mathematical cube, right? Cubes. So what that means is if you take C first as cube, right? C is about copyright risk because this Gen AI has taken data from so many sources. You don't know if you get an answer from Gen AI whether it is infringing somebody's copyright. So you need to figure out how to manage that. The next is U in the cubes. U is all about unreliable output. We know Gen AI has the ability to hallucinate, right? In fact, it's built such a way that it will give you an answer, and that answer could be hallucinating answer or a wrong answer. The risk actually is arising from the model and the algorithm that are used in LLM. It's a kind of inherent risk. That's the U part of cubes. The next is the B, and B is all about biases. And the biases arise because of the data that Gen AI uses. If the data is a sample data with some kind of bias in the data, it's inclined towards certain geography or certain demographics, Gen AI will amplify that. And that's a bias risk. It arises because of the data that Gen AI used for training. The next is the E, which is all about explainability risk. Why do you think this answer is right? Can the Gen AI explain it? If you ask a human will at least rationalize the answer. So how do you get that explainability from the Gen AI? That's a risk, right? And the last is the S, which is what we all know a lot about as security professional. S is security and privacy. I've combined privacy with S. That's all about what data security is there. Is there a chance of leakage? Will Gen AI systems be attacked? Will the privacy be compromised, or any regulated data will go out? All of that is combined that under S, the security. So that's how I try to remember the Gen AI risk, the cubes.
So I think it's a very good abbreviation to
Yeah.
remember on that. But now the question that is coming is a traditional security guy or a security professionals. There are areas like biased outcome or how the transparency of how that outcome has derived. Those type of things, as security guys are never involved in any of those things earlier. Because CIA was our core area, then we included accountability to that, maybe resilience to some extent, but this is a totally new area we are opening up on that. And so traditionally, or many of the solutions, if you look at in the industry, which we call which we name as our tech stack or tool stack for a cybersecurity officer, now many of those things are not there. So from Accuity point of view, you are the CEO of Accuity, which is a very innovative solutions you have come out. How do you address this? Do you address the all the issues you mentioned in the cubes, or is it how does it work?
Yeah, that's a interesting question because addressing all the aspect of cubes may not be the way to go for security professionals. Because a lot of those, the first four part of cubes, the CUBE, has to do a lot with the underlying data and underlying model, the technology behind programs on GenAI, which probably is not a direct ownership of security team. So I'll rather focus on the S part because S itself is quite complex. And when I say S, S and P, privacy for Gen AI, right? And we begin with solving the S and P and then see how the other part of cubes are taken care of. So suppose you are a security team in an organization and you see that there is a Gen AI deployment happening. The first part of security to look at is what type of deployment is it? If it is a simple deployment where users are directly going to a LLM, either public or private, then what you need to do is look at filtering what users are sending to LLM and filtering what LLMs are sending back to users. Because you don't want users to send sensitive data, privacy data, or any acceptable usage kind of thing. You want to filter those out. Similarly, when the output is coming back, right? Remove any toxicity, objectionable material, unacceptable material back from the output. Now, the good thing is a lot of these LLMs have guardrails built in, which can take care of many of these aspects, but they are not specific to your organization. So you would want to add some more content filtering beyond the guardrails. And these are done best with what today products are called like prompt gateway or prompt filtering, or sometimes they're called as AI firewall. All of them are same. They are about content monitoring and filtering between users and LLMs. Now that's the simplest example or simplest deployment. But as your organization's progresses further, they are not going to have just users sending something to LLM. You would end up building some GenAI applications that are somehow automating some of your functions. Maybe you could have a procurement function and you build a GenAI application that automates the procurement function. Now, as soon as you build GenAI application, you need to go beyond just monitoring for what is happening as data between users and LLM. You would want these GenAI applications to be secure. Now, there is traditional security of application like code insecurities and vulnerabilities in codes and all. But beyond that, in Gen AI, you'll need to start looking at, can somebody do a prompt injection to this application? Can somebody do a jailbreaking of all the prompts and guardrails that are there in this application? Can somebody also leak the prompt, write questions such a way that application gives out what the prompts are, or maybe give out what the training data is underlying? And there are many more such things like excessive agency. You would want to test this application to see what all actions these applications are able to take. You don't want GenAI application to take actions too much on your enterprise systems. So that's the excessive agency risk. So as you build applications to automate your functions, you will end up doing some application security testing, either through tools or through red teaming. And these are slightly different tests than the normal applications because you'll be testing for all these prompt injections and agency, excessive agency, and all. So that I would call as your second stage of security evolution. But the next stage is where it is even more critical. Now, suppose you connect your GenAI applications and agents to your backend systems, whether to your document stores like SharePoint or to your databases and data lakes, or to your applications like CRM or any procurement application, the SAP and all. When you connect them and these becomes an agent, that is, they are now working on behalf of a user, then you end up with many more risks. And that's where security becomes more trickier. The three key risks that can come up there is first, how do you prevent these agents from getting to data that you don't want them to have? For example, you connected your agent to a customer database, right? Because this agent is now trying to automate the customer support. How do you prevent this agent not to take customer address, customer age, customer gender, things which are more private? They should not take it, right? Now, in a traditional application, if you had built a traditional application, you would have hard coded the queries. You would have hard coded the screens and menus. So the application would never have taken the gender, age, address, any of the private information. But in GenAI case, you don't hard code anything. When a user asks a question in natural language, GenAI dynamically creates a query or a API call and pulls that data. And that's the time you want to prevent GenAI to take any private data or even worse, your confidential data. You have some IP data or even a salary data, right? You don't want GenAI to pull those things while it is pulling up employee data. So that's the first risk you have to take care of. Prevent GenAI from taking too much data. We call that as overexposure of data. The second thing is you want GenAI to honor the permission. Suppose, Sunil, you are head of sales and you ask a question, give me last week's sales data. And versus suppose I am a regional manager and I ask the same question to a GenAI agent, give me last week's data. Now, GenAI agent should give me less data than you, right? Because I have less permissions in the backend. Now, how do you make sure that GenAI honors those permissions? And the last risk when you are connecting your GenAI to backend is now this GenAI should not become a launchpad for attacks. If it is connected to your CRM, it should not become a place where it starts querying data, deleting data, doing API calls, which corrupts your data, and so on and so forth. So those are the three things that security professionals will start facing when they reach the third stage of GenAI, where you have a private GenAI application built custom for a certain domain and then getting connected to lots of your backend systems.
I think before itself, when it is collecting data from different data sources, there is a possibility that the customer may be getting data which is inappropriate. That's also one of the basic concerns the companies will have. Immediate reputations are gone, or that's a major challenge. So where does the Acquity solution come into place?
Yeah. So what we are saying is you can solve these things through lot of variety of ways. You can write additional code on your GenAI application to check for data, to check for users. You will also need to go and clean up your backend because permissions are very loosely defined in backend. You'll need to do a lot of things on cleaning up data in the backend so that such kind of over permissions and wrong data don't fall in place. And you'll need to also add some other multiple security technologies like DLP, threat monitoring, provisioning, all those things. What we are saying is we can simplify all that for you. Don't add more code to your GenAI agent. You don't need to do a lot of additional things on your backend. You don't need to architect multiple technologies for doing all this. Just add equity between your GenAI agent and the backend. So we become kind of a broker and we make sure that every access, every request, and every data that is returned follows your policies and it follows the regulations and the guidelines that are there about safety automatic.
So you're offloading a lot of load on the agents to your central platform or the broker, which is a middleware type of thing which is going to come into picture.
That's right. You can think of it as how it happened in cloud, right? Initially, everybody went to cloud, applications were in cloud, users were all over the place. Now, what we are doing similar thing. Now there is user, there is an A application, and then there are all the applications and databases and documents. We try to be a broker between them and we natively understand all the GenAI protocols and we focus on the GenAI risks, which is a lot more around data and privacy and kind of permissions, over permissioning, which probably was not so much in cloud, but they get a lot more amplified in GenAI.
So it's a much expanded version of a Caspi type of solution coming up. So Rajat, when you mentioned it, I was just visualizing it in a different way also. There will be tens or hundreds of GenAI agents in a large organization, and each of them are decentralized, federated way, written by individual administrators or managed and by developers and administrators, where the organization has no clue how each of this work. So you are bringing in a center platform where everything can be governed from a single unit.
Partly, yes, that's a good observation. Yeah. So we would want data to be decentralized because that way the data quality is better. We would want the Gen AI automation and functions that Gen AI enables to be decentralized because that way the businesses have better control and they can innovate more. But the security, the privacy, and the governance over what is getting accessed and what is getting returned, that need not be decentralized because you would want to have a common policies, common compliance, common audit across all this. And that's how we are trying to solve the problem. Our equity layer centralizes the security, the privacy, the trust, and the governance of all this, while it allows agents and data owners to control their own data and their own agents.
Because why I took that example, because many a times we hear from organization the way API is actually had in organization. There are hundreds of APIs. Nobody has a clue how many are there, how it has been configured, because there is no way to centralize it and govern. So at some point of time, many versions of GenAIs and all of that thing in by different functions, internally, externally, all is going to come into picture where things can go completely out of hand.
It's interesting you mention APIs because a lot of Gen AI agents in future will access APIs. And there is API gateway which is trying to centralize that. But API gateways are meant more for facilitating the API access. They are not meant for controlling the permissions and controlling the data, filtering the data. So that's one analogy for Acquity. Acquity is kind of an API gateway, but also controls permissions, detects threats, and filters data. But GenAI will also access beyond API, they'll access directly your databases through text to SQL or your data lakes. And a lot of it will also access your documents, the unstructured data, spread across your SharePoint or file servers or portals or websites. Right? Now imagine a API gateway which not only is doing API but also doing text to SQL filtering, permission management, threat management, and unstructured data permission management, threat management. So there are two ways to look at Acquity. One, you can think of it as a CASB for Gen AI agents and RAG pipeline, or you can think of a API extended to databases and documents and doing permissions and data filtering and threat management. Either ways.
Perfect. Pradeep, you have over 2.5 decades of experience in security and privacy. Now, hearing Rajat now, what do you think is the way ahead for us? Because there is do you also echo the same sentiments of huge risk associated, which we need to intervene and solve it at the earliest in the planning stages itself?
Yeah, as we hear this from Rajat, we are getting educated, and so far it was more of an excitement on AI adoption. But the underlying risk, which actually is yet to be uncovered, and how state actors are going to use it cleverly before even some regulation or maturity comes up in this space, is going to be a blissful ignorance era of earlier AI adoption. So, of course, there is a lot of CISOs echoing the same concerns because they don't know what actually, there is no structured approach in the market. One. Second, there is no matured product actually which assure them Gen AI risk is going to get uh, eliminated. Definitely there is a awareness to be created in the market, as well as people are looking for such solutions which will give some sort of assurance to cyber assurance in Gen AI usage.
So, Rajat, now a question. Currently, there are a lot of adoptions happening. At least many organizations are claiming to have a built-in, all of that thing. How are they currently managing the risk?
So for Gen AI, most of the organizations currently may not be in that agentic mode of deployment. Maybe they're doing the first stage using LLM to help a user. So user and LLM directly interact. In that scenario, the user is bringing the data on their own and feeding it to LLM. And at that place, almost everybody uses some kind of content filtering, AI firewall or something like that. So that's getting adopted a lot. The agentic flow and the RAG and getting connected back to the backend system. Today, if you're deploying it in production, you are trying to mix and match a lot of things to solve the problem of security. You're writing code, additional code in your agent for data filtering, for permission management. You are doing a lot of cleaning up on the backend, creating in several cases new APIs because you think existing APIs are not fine grained enough, or you're creating new tables and views, or you're cleaning data, taking data out from a document store and putting it in a new store. So a lot of this additional work they are doing in the backend, which is not scalable. So once organizations start deploying agents in large scale and connecting them to the backend, that time these things will fall apart. These stopgap things will not happen. And that's where products like Acquity comes in and solves the problem for people.
So essentially, it is a non-scalable, not only non-scalable, it is increasing the attack surface. because you have so many rules created, because errors, omissions, oversights, all can create a problem in the entire usage of it or the outcome of it. Now, from a yeah,
That's right. And also means just to add to what you said, errors, if you have decentralized security written in every agent, likely errors are more. And also you lose visibility. There is no
correct.
central place where you come and see what rules are applied where. And if you want to change a rule, how do you easily change from one central place? So all those problems are also there.
So Rajat, that brings to me another question. So visibility. So now in a normal Active Directory or a firewall or any of those security controls, we have enough logs getting generated or events getting generated. So we can track it on an SIM, those type of things. Does the GenAI ecosystem create enough logs to, because there is a requirement saying, as per the ethical usage of AI, that how GenAI came with this outcome has to be transparent. So do
Right.
we really get a logs in the current state, or can you just help us understand that?
Right. So, yeah, so we are coming to the explainability risk of the cubes, the E part of cubes. So, obviously, when you're writing a GenAI application or creating a GenAI agent, you would need to make sure that you are having enough logging into that application so that you can help in explainability. If a user did not get an answer, why it did not get an answer, that GenAI should be able to explain. So a lot of logging has to be inherently written in the GenAI applications. But beyond that, when these GenAI applications start accessing other systems, you need another place where you want to have a centralized logging so that you know which system was accessed by which GenAI agent, what queries were fired, what data was returned. You don't want to run to each GenAI agent to find that out. You want it at a central place. So yeah, so I would say logging needs to be done at both. For explainability purposes, you need to have logging in your GenAI applications and agents. And for the traditional metadata, traffic, queries, answers, interactions with the backend, you need to have a separate logging. And that is where a separate layer like Acquity helps, because now all the logging happens there. Otherwise, you'll have to pipe everything back to an SIEM and create additional apps on SIEM to manage this. Again, cumbersome process.
It is, because so much of development going to happen. So every agent, if you look at, is connecting to multiple data sources.
Right.
So and natively, my understanding, enough logs are not getting generated also. Does it also solve with the Acuity a possibility of a rogue agent coming into picture? So you can stop it or identify it?
Yes, that will be an interesting scenario in future because people can introduce an agent and get it connected to something in the backend or start giving wrong answers to users. Or an existing agent might get taken over by an attacker.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we are solving is we are profiling every agent, what it is answering, where it is accessing, all those things. And then if we see a deviation of that profile, then obviously we say there is some risk here. Maybe the agent has gone rogue or it has been taken over by somebody. Also, we are controlling the provision of agents to the backend, which systems it can talk to the backend. Right? So if somebody introduces a new rogue agent and somehow it colludes and finds one system to connect to, that's the most it can do. It cannot connect to many more systems because we control what agents can connect to what systems. So those are the two ways which we are solving the problem of rogue or a agent takeover attack.
Rajat, I think is an amazing solution. See, most of the time in
Yeah.
security, what we are seeing is a reactive approach. We
Yeah.
come with new solutions. The cloud came, that came, and then we see a lot of incidents, and then one by one small solutions come into picture as a patch up happening there. But great to see that you have initiated Acuity, which is proactively trying to solve
Exactly.
the problems around. Now, as a security professional, how do you see the use cases evolving for security from GenAI?
Okay, so that's a parallel track.
The reason Rajat asked is you were earlier the CEO of Palladian, one of the most respected security companies. So that's the reason I pointed that question back.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we had a good run with Palladium securing enterprise systems. So yeah, so that's the second part of Gen AI in cyber, right? You can either secure the Gen AI or you can use Gen AI for cyber security. So in the second part means there is a lot of potential. You can, so let's think of key functions in cyber security, right? You have threat management as a function, which is all about SOC. You have vulnerability management as a function. You have compliance audit as a function. You have user provisioning, governance, user access governance as another function. Now, each of these functions can be automated a lot by GenAI. Like SOC as an example, right? You can create an agent for SOC, and which is what Copilot, Microsoft Copilot has done, where it can solve a lot of these things that a SOC typically does. For a given threat, show me what else has happened in the last 5 days. Do a quick analysis with a threat source or external threat intelligence, or just take this file and run it in a sandbox. You can just tell these things to a GenAI agent as an English language. You don't need to know the integrity, nitty-gritty, the technical details of that. So it can solve a lot of problems in SOC in terms of today we have less people, lower skills. We are trying to figure out how to train SOC analysts up. A lot of those things can be offloaded to a GenAI agent. The same with vulnerability management. A GenAI agent can take a report, figure out what's the most priority things in this to do, and start tracking it. In fact, it can start interacting with the IT team to say whether the patch is done, not done. So a lot of these things can be done through an agent. So a lot of potential in applying GenAI to cybersecurity.
So, how do you see in the next 2 3 years time, how will this all evolve?
Yeah, it's always difficult to say what will happen, right? Because right now means a lot of hype about it, so a lot of things will be said. This can happen, that can happen. But I'm trying to think more on the usage of Gen AI. We all know Gen AI models will become more powerful, more logical, more reasoning, more problem solving, all those things. But when it comes to usage, there are two trends that are emerging right now. One is to automate a role. What I mean is, since we were on the topic of SOC, suppose I want to automate the level one role. I can then create an agent which will do exactly what a level one SOC analyst does automatically. Or think of, say, in sales, SDR, sales development rep. I can create an agent which will do exactly the role of sales development rep, prospecting, sending emails, finding leads, all those things. So that is a trend about replacing a role with an agent, which is a role automation. But I don't think that is going to be the more widespread usage of Gen AI, because you'll always want some kind of supervision, oversight. So the bigger thing that I foresee is a function automation instead of role automation. What I mean is, like, say in SOC, you create an agent which automates the SOC function, and multiple roles interacts with that. So a level one role will interact with SOC agent for, say, triaging. A level two role will interact with that for investigation or hunting. A level 3 role will interact with that for, say, metrics and reporting. You have a function automation of SOC, or you could have a function automation of, say, vulnerability management, or a procurement function. You have a procurement function agent which supports business users, supports the purchase manager, supports the function financial manager, so multiple roles. So I see that as a bigger adoption where organizations will automate their functions, expose these agents to multiple roles, and while the human and the roles control the decisions, control the higher level thing, the routine things gets done by the agents. So that's how I see evolving in the short run.
Pradeep, what are you hearing or understanding from the trends?
Yeah, as I said earlier, Middle East, at least the market which we are familiar with, there is a lot of excitement and adoption is becoming very major trend in industry, especially on corporates where automation can bring business benefits. There is heavy adoption in this segment, but they are not aware about the security risk. The way what Rajat was explaining, the underlying risk and emerging threat vector is going to be huge. So many CISOs are concerned, but they have no much idea about how to manage this new entrant in the field. That itself is a myth because it's evolving over a period of time. As Rajat was saying, each large language model is going to get trained in different ways. So how it shape up in future is going to be an unknown variable, which we need to adapt with better, maybe a similar AI adopted security techniques only can prevent such new emerging vectors, which we are yet to see. There will be an adoption in the market for just like how it happened during cloud Casby. I'm sure Accuity will be a forefront runner in this space in an AI brokerage space where there'll be a huge adoption happening in this segment.
No, I agree with that. See, most of the discussions, if you see, or the webcast or a podcast or a LinkedIn, is all on the use cases from a customer experience, the automation part of it. Very rarely we hear about the protecting the
Yeah,
Gen AI ecosystem. So
true.
that discussions very rarely happens. That's where I happened to visit the Accuity website and then read a lot of blog. I think I got very much inspired to, because 30 years I spent on security, and then I started looking and saying, hey, it's going to change the way we are working.
Yeah,
Because in from security professional side, there are a lot of things we need to learn new.
true.
Because this is because in an organization, it is end of the day, security team is going to be accountable for Gen AI security, and there are a lot of new domains on that. I think, Rajat, you are doing a fantastic job, and thank you very much for accepting this invite and being part of this, both Pradeep and Rajat.
Okay.
And I would request we may need more sessions specific on each of these topics later, because it's a very new and very few people talk about it, I think. And all the very best for the equity. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so
Thank you.
so much, Sunil. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Good discussions and look forward to more such discussions.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Sunil.